Hello and welcome to God Stories. Here you'll find my friends and I exploring some of the stories that God has written, both ones he's written in ancient history and in our own lives today. Today we're going to be looking at the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus, alongside the story of Kathy, the mother of me and of Ben and of Sam. So we're going to pick up Mary's story when she was a teenager in first century Israel, and she had a bizarre encounter with an angel who told her that she was going to give birth to a son who was going to be a king with a kingdom that would never end. And she was told this as a virgin who had a fiancé, and they hadn't been together yet, so it was very strange for her to hear. But it happened, and she gave birth to this son, called him Jesus, and when he was only a baby, her and Joseph went to the capital city of Israel, to Jerusalem, and met a man named Simeon, who spoke God's words to Mary about the child that she had in her arms. And this is what he said. "This child marks both the failure and the recovery of many in Israel, a figure misunderstood and contradicted, the pain of a sword thrust through you, but the rejection will force honesty as God reveals who they really are."
And the reason I really like that verse is it tells me that God knew everything that was going to happen. And I find that really helpful in my own story. So I'm married to Colin, and we've got three boys, Josh, Ben and Sam. They were quite close together, so three under fives, and lots of excitement, expectation, all that kind of stuff when you have babies. One of the things that's very relevant, I think, to say is that all of them were dedicated, which means that in a church service we kind of publicly acknowledge that life is a gift from God, and that these boys have been entrusted into our care to look after them as best we could, and to teach them about God, and ultimately to acknowledge that they belong to God, not to us, which looking back has been quite hard to do at times.
So pick up Mary's story 12 years on, and this is actually the only story we get of Jesus between the ages of 0 and 30. But the three of them, Mary, Joseph and Jesus, alongside probably other family and friends, are doing this annual journey to the capital city, to Jerusalem again, and they would have gone here every year for the Feast of Passover, which happens around Easter time. And on the way back home, they realised they didn't have Jesus with them, so they began looking for him, and eventually went back to Jerusalem, and after 3 days of having been without him, they found him in the temple, among the teachers and religious people, listening and asking them questions. And when they found him, Mary particularly wasn't best pleased, and this is what she said when she found him. "Young man, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been half out of our minds looking for you." He said, "Why were you looking for me? Didn't you know that I had to be here, dealing with the things of my father?" But they had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah, and I guess we've lost all three boys at different times when they were little for a few hours, and just remember how scary it is. But if they'd been gone for 3 days, I would have been flipping furious. And especially to get this kind of sense of, what are you so cross about? And so the other bit that relates to that, from that story to me, is that the journey with your children, when you start to sense that actually they're gonna separate. And for you, it was, probably the biggest moment was when you left and went to university, and can just remember driving away and leaving you and thinking, oh my goodness, how's he going to cope? And just the pain of separation and leaving you behind. With Ben, he wanted to be a soldier for a long time, and at 17 decided he didn't want to do college anymore, wanted to join the Marines, which he did. And I can clearly remember at Families Day the message that you've given us your son and we will give you back a man, and that sense that we'd handed him over to somebody else to do the rest of his growing up. And I can remember the early days of training when he was going back down to Devon, of him just being like pale and looking skinny and being ambivalent about going back. And they'd said if they don't want to go back, make sure you encourage them to, because they will want to at the end. At the end they'll appreciate it. And this unbearable sense of letting him go, and I'd run down the platform until the train was outside. And with Sam, talented footballer from young, and at the age of 8 was joined the academy, and the contrast between Sunday league games, when as a parent you'd be on the sidelines and you'd be really involved and you'd be shouting and lots of parents would be swearing and running on the pitch and all sorts of stuff, to the first Saints game. And I think we signed something to say that we'd behave and only clap, and just standing there it was really, really confusing actually, and just doing a little clap when they scored a goal, and this sense, again, of this child kind of moving into this world of football that I didn't understand, and that they were going to in some ways take over parenting him as well. So that sense of having to let your children go is painful, and trust somebody else to to do well by them.
We're going to pick up Jesus and Mary's story quite a while on now. This is about 20 years on. And by this point, Jesus has become quite a figure in the local area. He's done miracles. He's fed thousands of people miraculously with just a few loaves and pieces of fish. He's got 12 close followers and other crowds following him. But unexpectedly to most, he's now headed to Jerusalem, back to this capital city, and he's headed there with one purpose, and that's to die on a Roman cross. And probably some of the same community of religious leaders and teachers who he'd talked to and questioned as a 12-year-old boy were now part of that same collective that wanted to have him die on a Roman cross. And we come to this excruciating moment just outside Jerusalem, when the crowds are watching these victims of capital punishment, most of them criminals, and they're justly, but Jesus unjustly. And this is the moment when we read how Mary and those around her are responding as these scenes unfold. While the soldiers were looking after themselves, Jesus' mother, his aunt, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene stood at the foot of the cross.
And Mary actually stood and watched her son die, and I can just imagine the sense of complete confusion. This son of hers was at the peak of his career, for want of a better word, and the crowds were following him, and suddenly she's watching him die, and it just doesn't make sense. What a waste. It doesn't make sense. And I guess in lots of ways I feel I can relate to that story in terms of our journey with the boys over the last 3.5 years, starting with you coming, kind of like you were very settled in Nottingham and doing in teaching, and suddenly arrived home on your birthday in a real state, and that was the end of your teaching career, and I couldn't understand really what was going on, and you weren't okay for a while, and just that sense of it had all come to an end somehow, and then the following year I had this really strange road trip actually. Sam had gone on loan from Saints, had been struggling to make his way there and gone to Middlesbrough, and I decided to go and visit him, went to Middlesbrough, and on the way back stopped off at a monastery for 3 nights I think, and to have just some space for me. I think I was struggling at that point with losing the boys in different ways, and asked to have some time with one of the monks, and sat with this guy and was kind of really wanting him to tell me, what was the essence of this Christian life, how does this work, what's it all about. And he wasn't terribly keen to share, but as I left he said this to me: let go and learn to receive God's love. And 2 weeks after that, Sam caught his toe in the pitch at Middlesbrough, and ruptured his ACL, which is potentially a career-threatening injury, and has been struggling to recover ever since, and came back down to Southampton. Middlesbrough loan was ended. In the meantime, Ben, who had been talking for a long while about special forces, had gone for it. He'd been badged in the June of that same year, and he was doing diving training. And literally 2 weeks after Sam's injury, we had two men appear at the door and to inform us that Ben had drowned in a training incident. And it was like a bomb had dropped on us, really. Just everything just up in the air, and so much of what you've been holding on to and had been important and you put your security in just fragmented. And one of the things I'm aware is that the pain of that loss has exposed an awful lot of stuff in me that has been quite hidden and kind of not dealt with. And so since he died, I've been aware of how much anger there is, how much fear of being out of control, fear of being vulnerable, fear of facing difficult emotions. It's kind of all just been uncovered, and I've had to look at it. And it comes back to the phrase of the monk about letting go. And interestingly, Ben wasn't a great one for giving presents. He always spent his money on something else. But he gave me 2 books as presents. One was about some men climbing Everest, and I think quite a few of them died actually. And the other one was a book called, which is about letting go. And I just think it's so ironic. I don't know why he gave it to me, but the kind of essence of the book really is about the importance of recognising that we're not in control. You really realise that when you lose a son, that actually this illusion of having it all together and having successful sons and things like that is not in your control. And it talks about facing difficult emotions and not hiding away from them. And it talks about being able to receive love. So the monk and Ben kind of gave me this message which has been really significant, and I feel like I've been learning to let go increasingly over the last few years. Really let go of so much of my identity was wrapped around the boys and their success, and having to let go of that and work out who I really am, and having to let go of my need for answers has been a huge one. My need to understand, because it just seems so senseless, all of it. And I have been really angry about it. So having to let go of that and accept that this is my story and that God's in it and that ultimately God is in control has been such a challenge. And it's painful letting go. We're all much more comfortable holding on to the things that we know and make us feel safe. But I guess one of the things that happens when you let go is I've had a much more clear truth, I suppose, about who I am, but also who God is. So some of the ugliness of the things that are in me that I've wanted to kind of keep hidden, but also a sense that God is not somebody that just gives you everything you want to make you happy. He doesn't promise for things to be okay. He doesn't promise that your children are going to be successful. He doesn't measure success in the way that we have done and that parents tend to. But what he does promise very clearly is that he's going to be with you. And it hasn't always felt like that. There's been times when he's felt a very long way away and I felt really on my own, but actually different people have really been around for us and given us love and comfort in a way that I wouldn't normally have found it very easy to receive, but it's been massive. And he also promises to give you strength. When I look back at things like the funeral, and we've been through lots of military kind of meetings and things like that, and I've really felt like God's given me the strength to deal with it. But probably one of the most significant things has been a sense of peace, which you would not imagine to have when things have been so difficult, but a sense of God's peace. So, yeah. And I'm still on the journey. I'm not at the end of it, but I feel like it's paradoxical, isn't it, that I've learnt to trust God more and know him in a deeper way than I ever have done before, really.
Yeah. Now, conscious that this is being released on Mother's Day and there may be mums watching, and just wanted to pray for any mums out there. It's not a journey that I understand, but it's one that Mum understands more than most, and Yeah, Father, thank you for what Mum shared, and thank you for Mary's journey, and thank you for the things that you do promise. And I just ask for all the mums watching, Lord God, for that peace that doesn't make sense and the strength that you give. Bless them, and may they know they're valued today by you and by those around them. Amen. This has been God Stories. This has been Mary's story and Kathy's story, my mum. Thanks for watching.